Hi, and welcome to Watch It Played. My name is Rodney Smith, and in this video, we're going to learn the 2 to 4 player game, Carpe Diem, designed by Stefan Feld and published by Ravensburger, who helped sponsor this video. This game is taking us to Rome, and frankly, in the year 1 BC, things are a bit of a mess. The city could use some improvements, so there's no better time to seize the day, which is what Carpe Diem stands for. You and the other players will each be working to improve your own city districts with profitable buildings and beautiful landscapes. Make the best improvements, and you win. So join me at the table, and let's learn how to play. To set up, place this game board in the center of the play area. Now each player collects 4 random frame parts and assembles them randomly into a square frame like I'm doing here. And then you put one of these city district boards into the center with the handle of the shovel pointing into the top right-hand corner. On your board, you'll find 9 of these writ symbols. Set one of these matching tokens over top of each one. Each player also collects a resource board and the patrician and 5 disc markers in their color, putting them into their basket here. Your patrician is then set into any one of these unoccupied blue frames of the main board, and it doesn't matter which order the players place them. The cards with this back are the forum cards, which you separate and shuffle into 4 piles based on the letters found here at the top. Then examine the dots at the bottom, finding the row that matches your number of players, because this will tell you how many cards to take from each stack based on your number of players. The row with 3 dots, for example, is for 3-player games. And filled-in dots represent the cards that you take from the stack. So from stack A, you take 2 cards, and in stack B, you take 3 cards. Again, in a 3-player game. In this video, we'll be setting up a 2-player game, and the symbols say to take 2 cards from each of the stacks. Any cards you have remaining, you will not be using during this game, and you can just return them to the box. The cards you've kept, you'll shuffle together, and then place randomly face up into these forum spaces of the board. In a 2-player game, you'll leave the 4 corners completely empty. In a 3-player game, you'll leave 2 opposing corners empty, and in a 4-player game, you'll fill in every one of these spaces. By the board, shuffle and set face down the cards with this back, known as fountains, along with these double-sided victory point cards, sorted by their values. Nearby, place the coins, bread tokens, and goods. I've sorted these into some handy game trays I have, and if you'd like some of your own, you'll find links in the description below. Now find all of the building tiles, which you separate and shuffle based on their backs, putting all of the white back tiles in one group and all the black back tiles in another. Then place one black building tile face up onto each of these spaces found here on the bottom of the board, and it will look something like this when you're done. Now add 4 random white-backed buildings face up onto each of what are known as the blueprint spaces of the board. And again, when you're done, it will look something like this. Now give this starting player token to the oldest person, or just choose someone randomly. They then put one of the discs from their bowl onto this space of what is known as the prestige track here, and then in clockwise order, each other player puts one of their discs on top. Now, using this chart found in the rulebook, each player begins with a certain number of victory points, taking that value from the victory point cards. In our 2-player game, the first player gains 8 points, and the second gets 9. And that's the setup. In Carpe Diem, players will be collecting tiles to construct buildings, create landscapes, and produce goods, trying to create the most prestigiously arranged district. If they earn the most prestige by the end of the game, they win. The game begins with the building phase, starting with the first player taking a turn, and then turns continue in clockwise order around and around the table. So let's go back to the table and see how a turn is taken in the building phase. First, move your patrician to either adjacent space, and players can even end up in the same spaces together over the course of the game. But you must always move. You cannot stay in the space you were already in at the start of your turn. And then after moving, you collect any one tile from the attached area. So in this case, if I did go here, I could take any one of these. Let's say I take this one. And we'll see in a moment what you do with these tiles. But as players take their turns, more and more of these tiles will be removed from the board. And in a 2-player game, as soon as only 2 tiles remain within a section, they are both removed from the board and just returned to the box. Now let's say instead we had a 3-player game. In that case, when only 1 tile remains, that's when it's returned to the box. Also, if a patrician moves on to a space that has no tiles in its section, it immediately moves again for free in the same direction until it lands on a space with at least one building tile. And it can choose to move into an empty space like this, even if there have been tiles on an adjacent space in the opposite direction. Now, I had said that you must always move your patrician to an adjacent space, but there is one exception. We'll see how you get these bread tokens later, but on your turn, before moving, you can choose to spend a bread token, returning it back to the supply, and then you can move to any space, or even stay put. But either way, after that, you then collect a tile from the area you're in. No matter where you collect a tile from, you must always immediately place it on your board. So let's learn how that works. The first tile you collect must always be placed on the spot marked with a shovel, and tiles can be rotated in any direction. But once placed, they can't be moved later. Any new tiles you add to the board in future turns must be put so that they share at least one full side with any other tile you already have, as long as the artwork perfectly matches any tiles directly adjacent to it. Let me show you a few more examples by just adding some additional tiles to this board. Now this one can go here because although they have very different elements printed on the center of the tiles, their edges are a perfect match, showing full grass on each side. This tile matches on the edge here, both of them showing pawns, but not on this edge. So this is not a legal placement. We'll go over the different elements on these tiles in a moment, but this is a vineyard and it's going straight into some grass. When you place tiles along the border, you also have to match those tiles to the frame as well. So we'd need a full grass side here like we have. Also, if you place a tile and it covers a space with one of these writ symbols, you return that token back to the box and then move your disc one space forward on the prestige track. When gaining prestige, if you would ever enter the same space as another player, you put your token on top of any that might already be in that space. If you ever collect a piece that you cannot legally place, you just put it face down by your board. It may be worth half a point at the end of the game, as we'll see later. So it's not a total loss. I'll also mention you can choose not to place a tile you've collected, even if you have a legal place you could put it. And those are the rules for placing tiles. And players will continue taking turns, moving their patrician, collecting a tile, and adding it to their board. But why would you pick one tile over another? Well, tiles come in different types, as you've probably noticed, and how you arrange them on your board will provide you with various benefits. So let's go back to the table and learn about what those benefits are. These are all known as landscapes, and they are either ponds, farmyards, gardens, or vineyards. As you place tiles adjacent to landscapes, you make them bigger. And if you ever close a landscape in, like I've done here, it is considered complete, and you immediately gain a reward based on its type and size. Ponds earn you fish, gardens give you herbs, vineyards give you grapes, and farmyards provide chickens. Landscapes can be made up of 2 to 4 tiles of the same type, and your reward for completing one is to take a number of its related goods equal to the size of the landscape minus 1. This completed pond, for example, is 2 tiles big, so I gain 1 fish. If I completed the farmyard here, it's 3 tiles big, so that means I gain 2 chickens. Keep in mind, bread, coins, and goods are not a limited resource. If you ever run out of pieces in the supply, just use something else as a suitable replacement. Or use an unsuitable replacement like actual bread. It's your game, you can do what you want. You are not allowed to make a single landscape larger than 4 tiles big, but you can have several separate landscapes on your board, even more than one of the same kind. In addition to landscapes, there are also tiles that show dwellings, and there are 4 main types, which you can distinguish by their colors. There's merchants, granaries, administration, and craftsmen. They come in halves, and as soon as you put 2 matching halves together, you complete that dwelling and immediately earn a bonus based on its type. So let's go over each of the different types. And as we do, keep in mind that reminders of the benefits provided by the various tiles you place are shown here on your personal board. For example, if you complete a merchant, return every good you have to the supply and take 1 coin for each. Then collect an extra coin. Now, if you ever complete a merchant when you have no goods, just collect a single coin. And later we'll see why coins are useful. If you complete a granary, then collect 2 bread from the supply. And as we saw earlier, you can spend bread to move to any space at the start of your turn. And it has another use as well that we'll learn about later. If you complete one of these administration buildings, then advance your disc 2 spaces on the prestige track. If you ever get to the end of the track and gain more prestige, don't advance further, but instead take a value 1 victory point card for each space you should have advanced but couldn't. As soon as you finish one of these Craftsman Dwellings, collect any one of the building tiles from the bottom row here and immediately place it on your board, resolving any benefit that it might give you as well. Just keep in mind, you never replace tiles taken from this row. Next we come to villas. They look like dwellings, but they're different. Villas can be made up of any number of tiles, and a completed villa is one that has no open ends like we see here. Now, these do not give you a bonus as soon as you complete them. Instead, they score you points at the end of the game, as we'll see later. There are 3 other types of tiles, each showing a complete building. So as soon as you place one, you gain their related benefit. If you place this market, immediately gain a coin. If you add a bakery to your board, then instead gain a bread. After placing one of these fountains, you draw 2 cards from the top of the fountain card deck. Secretly examine them, pick one to keep, and the other you return to the bottom of the deck. In the future, if you place another fountain, you again draw 2 more cards, but you'll add these to any that you already have, and then you pick any one of these to return to the bottom of the deck. In other words, you still have to discard one, but it doesn't have to be either of the 2 that you just drew. These cards you can look at any time, but you should keep them a secret from the other players because these will provide you with additional ways to score points at the end of the game. So we'll come back and talk about these a little later. And those are all the types of buildings that you can collect and place on your board. Now, no matter how many players you have, by the time you've gone around the table 7 times, all of the tiles on the central board will have been removed, which ends the building phase, and now you move on to the forum phase. Players take turn in an order based on who advanced furthest on the prestige bar. And if there's a tie, like we see here, the tie is broken by the player higher in the stack. So, for example, if we had 4 players and the discs were arranged like this, first yellow would go, then blue, then red, and then finally green. On your turn, place a single disc from your bowl onto any empty space between 2 cards. So maybe I'd go here, or perhaps here. Wherever you decide, you then resolve both attached cards in either order, gaining whatever is shown on the bottom half as many times as you choose to fulfill their top half. Now, it's very subtle, but there will either be a red or green strip running through the center. If you see red, it means that you pay the goods shown on the top half back to the supply. For example, this shows a red strip, so it means that for every herb and chicken that I pay back, I earn 3 victory points. You can also use any coins you have in place of any required goods. So I could, for example, trade in a coin and an herb to fulfill this requirement. And remember, you can fulfill these requirements as many times as you wish and can afford to. So I could return 2 chickens and a coin and 3 herbs to count as 3 sets, which would be worth 3 points each, and I collect that total from the cards in the supply. If the strip is green, like we see here, you don't pay the requirement at the top, you just need to have it. For example, here it's saying that for every 3 chimneys on my board, I gain 1 coin and 1 bread. Chimneys are found on the tops of villas, and you count how many you have on your board, even on villas that are not complete. Here I have a total of 7, so I've completed this twice, and that means I'll gain 2 coins and 2 bread. In addition, or even instead of fulfilling the top half of a card, you always have the option of paying 3 bread to cover this requirement in order to gain the bottom half. So here, if I wanted to, I could return 3 bread from my supply in order to gain 3 points, or all 6 of this bread to resolve it twice. You can decide on the order in which you fulfill your 2 forum cards, which means that by gaining a reward from one, you can use it to fulfill the requirement on the other. And you'll want to fulfill each of the 2 forum cards where you placed your disc, because for each one you don't fulfill at least once, you lose 4 points, returning that value in cards from here back to the supply. Now this means if you couldn't fulfill either of the cards, you'd lose a total of 8 points. Just note, when losing points, you only remove them from the cards you've collected. You don't, for example, adjust your position on the prestige track to make up any difference. Any extra you would have lost is just ignored. This is also why going first during the forum phase can be so important, because once a disc is placed, no one else can go there for the rest of the game. So as the game continues, there'll be fewer and fewer options to pick from here. We're not going to go over how each of the forum cards work in this video, as they're all explained by the icons they're showing. However, just turn to this page here and the other one over here, where they're explained in full detail if you have any questions while playing. After everyone has had their turn in the forum phase, that phase is over, and you pass the starting player token to the left. You also need to refill these blueprint spaces with random white building tiles that were left over during the setup. Then a new building phase begins. Once that's over, you have another forum phase, and when that's done, you'll refill these blueprint spaces again with the remaining white building tiles here. Now at the end of the third forum phase, you instead fill in the blueprint spaces with the leftover black building tiles. With the board refilled, you now start a new building phase with the new first player. And after that, you'll have another forum phase, and you'll continue like this. And once the players have completed the fourth forum phase, the game ends and it's time for players to calculate their final scores. You'll find reminders for how to calculate final scores printed here at the bottom of your board, but let's go through them together. First, total all unspent goods, coins, bread, and face-down building tiles you have and divide by 2, rounding down. Remember, face-down tiles are tiles you collected but were not able to place on your board. In this case, I have 7 leftover items, so dividing them in half and rounding down means I would gain 3 points. And to help keep track of this endgame scoring, I'll just collect additional cards from the supply. You also gain points equal to the space your prestige token is on, so in this case, 17 more points. Next, check the frame going around the outside of your city. Each of these sides will show 2 goals represented by these various icons. You now draw an imaginary line going from the score value with each icon straight across to the other side. And if that line cuts through a completed type of dwelling or landscape that's shown within that goal, you then earn the related number of points shown. However, you can only score each of these goals once. So even though this line cuts through 2 completed merchants, I'll only earn 4 points for this. Now keep in mind, to count, the item must be complete. Here we have a goal for cutting through villas, and we do cut through a villa right here, but this villa is not complete, so I don't score any points for this. Likewise, over here we have a goal for cutting through a completed pond. This line goes alongside a complete pond, but not directly through it, so it does not count. Now after scoring your frame, you'll reveal your fountain cards and score the amount of points shown on each for every completed landscape, building, or villa that it shows. Here I get 2 points for every completed merchant, 2 points for every completed vineyard, and 2 points for every completed pond. Finally, check for any completed villas on your board and score them individually based on how many chimneys each has. This one, for example, has 5 chimneys showing, and this one has 3. You then find a villa's number of chimneys here on this top row and score the value in victory points below it. So my villa with 3 chimneys would be worth 3 points, and the one with 5 chimneys would be worth 7 points. And those are all the ways to earn points. And if you run out of these scoring cards while you're trying to calculate everyone's score, just use a pen and paper and calculate the points that way. Either way, the player with the most points wins. If there's a tie, the tied player with the most writ tokens remaining on their board wins. And if there's still a tie, the tied player lowest on the prestige track wins, keeping in mind that if they're stacked, that would mean the lowest one on the stack. And that's how you play Carpe Diem. If you have any questions at all about anything you saw here, feel free to put them in the comments below and I'll gladly answer them as soon as I get a chance. You'll also find forums for discussion, pictures, other videos, and lots more over on the games page at Board Game Geek, and I'll put a link to that in the description below. And if you found this video helpful, please consider giving it a like, subscribing, and clicking that little bell icon so you get notification anytime we post a new video. But until next time, thanks for watching.